Just quickly, as an agenda, just to review the charge of the committee. The purpose of the Shadow Lakes, Shadow Pines Community Advisory Committee is to identify and review all land use options for both properties and report findings and prioritize recommendations to the Town of Penfield Board before the 31st of July. The Town Board charges the committee to study and issue a written report on the following attributes for both properties. Identify land use opportunities, land use constraints, community suggestions for use, and what the community does not want to see. Findings for each possible use should include description of use, how use would be supported, how use would be funded, how use would be implemented, and the opportunities and constraints and the zoning needs. So that's the charge for this committee. Last time we spent some time developing this, that we committed to as a team that we would have one conversation in the room, and the talking stick mics should help with that, that you'll speak for yourself and not for we or they. You speak for yourself. We'll do our best to share the airtime. We'll be hard on ideas and soft on people. If we have to make a decision on what first things first, the charge of the committee will be the highest and top priority. The work and effectiveness of the group, the team, the committee all together will be second, and your personal passion or interest will be third. And so that's how we will make decisions on where we're going. The bin list that we had is over here. There was a concern about the tight schedule. We talked about the quarry, and we had the answer for that a couple days later. We talked about the communication between meetings, and the Google Drive has been set up, and that was communicated today, Zach?
Yeah, that's Dropbox.
Okay.
Yep.
It's Dropbox. It's not Google Drive, it's Dropbox. Tonight, the subcommittees, the matrices for decisions, committee liability was covered. These two will be a key part of what we talk about tonight. We have not addressed the issue, why only public courses, although I believe the issue is these are the two courses that were in imminent chance of changing status, and that's why this committee was formed. Again, site visit, I don't believe that's been scheduled. This is a key part of tonight's work, how you will work as a committee, how you will come up with a work plan, responsibilities, where your personal passion is. And the committee wiki or forum, I don't believe, has been set up yet. Is that correct? Okay. So that's the bin list. We did have an email from Bob Cirque at, you're not Bob, are you?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, Bob.
Okay. So I'm still getting.
That's what I was listening to.
Okay, I'm just trying to memorize faces with, so I apologize. Great, okay. And I can actually, and Wayne, I can actually see that far. So, but Bob emailed at 5:22. He said he couldn't come tonight. He had a whole list of emails, of ideas in a valuable email, but at 5:22 I'm setting up for the meeting. So I said forward it to the committee. Did he forward it to the committee? Apparently not. Okay. So regardless, it was late breaking news, and I didn't want to send it on because that's really his choice whether he wants to forward those ideas. We really have to be in the moment and talk about those things, and I can't react to something that comes 8 minutes before I set up the flip charts. So that's kind of where we're at on that. So I would like to ask, and this needs to be brief because I want to save the maximum amount of time for your generative conversation as to how this committee will work together, what's important, and what the roles will be. But from the committee's perspective, have there been any new learnings since the last time we got together? Things that you want to share for the group of the other folks on the committee? Yes, Tom.
Sure. For the city planners and the engineer, a colleague of mine asked the question. He said it's probably been done, but he asked the question, has there been some work done on blast propagation and the velocity of blast propagation, how far that will go depending on the soil, and how that will affect the number of homes they can build and the radius they have to keep for that blast propagation? And I'm talking about foundation.
Sure.
and foundation structures.
That
and-
has not been addressed at this point in time, to my knowledge.
Wouldn't that be important?
Dolomite may have some information regarding that. They have geologists that they work with that might have that information. We can certainly ask into it.
And generally speaking, that might be something that gets identified in the state environmental quality review, and would be probably stipulated if anything were to happen from a development standpoint. That's something that the town could insist be addressed and/or documented by a licensed geologist, so that there's no question, and the town doesn't have to guess, and/or it should be.
It should be someplace.
Right, and it would be at the environmental quality review stage of the process, and that would happen early on. Seeker can, and that's the shortened word for state environmental quality review. That can be something that people sort of treat like sort of at the end, like a hurdle they have to get over to get the project. But in development, it's really best if it's utilized at the very early stage of development and even concept design and understanding what you're looking at doing. And so if a developer's smart, they're going to have a seeker form out and sort of be checking the boxes and knowing what the potential impacts are, and more importantly, documenting for them for themselves and also
Recognize that, but where that alludes to is, and again, this is a naive question, are there certain zoning requirements that make it stricter than it usually is? There's some very strict laws in California that would significantly limit.
That's not the case here. And as
Okay.
you can see, for many years, there was no development around the quarry over like where Terrace Hill is now. And now you're seeing Windsor Ridge going up. Those are still in very close proximity to the quarry. Obviously, we feel it here when they blast. We know when they're blasting because we can feel it here. Certainly, they can feel it at those locations. I'm not so certain that there's been damage to basement foundation walls, that type of thing. We haven't had people coming in droves saying, my wall's been cracked because of this or that. But the blasting process, it's a good point. The blasting process could be addressed as easy as today if we ask the questions what the protocol is and what they do in terms of trying to minimize impacts to area residents. A lot of it, and I think Jim may know because we talked about this, a lot of it's dependent upon where you are in the quarry too. If you're up higher, there's more of a tendency to feel it more strongly than if you're down 100 feet below grade. So there's a lot of different variables that come into play as that's occurring. But their geologists may be able to answer those kinds of questions for us as soon as we ask.
Okay, so, question? Yep.
One other question, point of clarification. Again, it's my confusion, but I think if I'm confused, other people may be confused. We still have on our top of the straw man list, keep the two properties as they are, et cetera, et cetera. Where does the sale of Shadow Lake to the Odenbachs and their investors stand? Because if it's very firm, we don't have to consider what happens to Shadow Lake because it's already...
Well, who knows how popular golf's going to be 10 years from now, I think it's something that we're still charged with a look at because we might be back here in 5 years, we might be back here in 10 years, hopefully not. Hopefully that's a popular course and it stays intact for as long.
Oh, no, I agree about the longer term, but what I'm saying is, as far as the foreseeable future goes, is it still a golf course?
Well, it is still a golf course, and the potential buyers have gone as far as even applying for new liquor licenses to continue to operate the venue there. But as I told you at the last meeting, and it's pretty common knowledge at this point in time, that the buyers do have the ability to beg off on the process if Shadow Pines becomes a golf course again. So
It was clear in the town's charge that they want this committee to look at both courses. And if the committee decides that they don't want to invest a lot of time in Shadow Lakes,
Right.
then that's really a committee decision. This is your committee. But they are asking in the system, in the town of Penfield system, they're asking for your vision of what would be wise for the town of Penfield for both facilities, recognizing that it is zoned residential and it could be sold again next month to somebody who has different plans. Okay, we had, yep, Bob? I think it's on if it's green.
I had some first-hand information about the blasting effects, because a week ago, last Saturday, there were 2 blasts that were really heavy, and my dog jumped and yelped and everything rattled. So I called the DEC and asked them to come out and put a seismograph in, and they did the following Wednesday. And there were blasts that Wednesday that were much milder, and they stuck the thing in the ground by the corner of my foundation, and it didn't even register on their graph. And then they went back and checked with the seismographs that Dolomite keeps. They keep them all the time, apparently. And they looked back at Dolomite's recording of that previous Saturday, and the DEC, I think it told Jim that was indeed at the upper limit. It was one of the heaviest blasts they do, and I don't know whether they were up high or whether it was more dynamite or whatever they use. Maybe Craig knows,
Well, there's a lot.
but in any case, it was well within the DEC limits. The normal blasting is that one Saturday was truly heavy, and they said something about, well, they were doing a job for the state, and the state demands the highest quality stone, which was up high, apparently.
Okay, so briefly, you want to respond to that, Craig? Because I want to...
There's a lot of variables on how much local residents sense the blast. It has to do with everything from height in the quarry to cloud cover to other things, where they are, which face they're blasting. And in the case of last Saturday, they must have been going for the high friction stone for roadways, in which case they would have had to go up higher for the state. So, I'm sure we could get John Swerkus, the geologist for Dolomite, to answer any questions that anybody had on the impact, but I know that in most cases when they have to respond to a local resident, they're very willing to go put seismographs in their driveways and show them what the actual vibrations are versus sensing either the noise or the thunder of it and that sort of thing. But John is really the best one to speak to the impacts of those.
Okay, so I don't mean to be pedantic with you, but the question and the answer that we had was that spending a lot of committee time on the quarry is off limits. Okay, I was hired to do a job for the lakes and the pines. Okay, and so that's what it has to be. I can understand that there's really sincere concern about the quarry, but that's a different committee. It's not this committee. I was hired to do a job, and I have to do that job to keep it focused on the pines and the lakes. Yes, Sam?
Agreed, but I think the whole point of this conversation was what's going to happen if they start blasting at Shadow Pines and it's the same pile of rock. So we started talking about what's happening at the quarry, but I think, Tom, was your point not that we want to know what's going to happen if they start blasting to do foundations at Shadow Pines?
And
Is that
again,
right?
yeah, and again, how that will affect.
Okay, well that's a different concern, which is about 3 steps down. Okay, it's sold for development. They're going to use blasting to put in basements, and what will that happen? Or I'm assuming that
informs what we recommend, right? If we know that there's going to be a lot of blasting for basements, if we have some reason to believe that's going to cause damage to local homeowners,
absolutely,
then that suggests that we would recommend something other than
absolutely, absolutely. But it's about blasting on the pines or the lakes. It's not about the quarry.
Exactly.
And it
Yes,
gets
Jim.
Just to give you some background, we do not allow blasting for basements. You have to build at the grade of the stone. You can't go into it because it creates drainage problems for the house. It's a mess. It happened back in the 60s. We've had problems. So our specifications now do not allow blasting for basements. The blasting that would occur, though, would be possibly for utilities if they have to go deep into the rock to get grades for sanitary and storm sewers. We don't know if that's the case at this point in time, but there would not be blasting for any single-family resident.
Okay, so I want to circle back here.
One last thing about the quarry, I brought up the question, and I'd like to put it to bed. My reason for raising the question, I'm afraid, was understood by Tony and the town board. I was raising the question because we're here to do a planning exercise about the land surrounding the quarry, and it seems hard or unwise to assume the quarry doesn't exist. And all I'm asking for is that we make an assumption for planning purposes what the quarry will be, and I would suggest we assume it's going to be this beautiful lake, suitable for a town park environment, and that we need to keep that in the back of our minds as we try to carve up the parcels of land on either side of it, or suggest the appropriate uses of those parcels. So
I hear you.
that's all I wanted to say,
Yep.
and I wanted to clarify that.
And the email went back saying if you wanted to put in a short recommendation on that at the end of your report, that would be okay.
But for now, for when we consider the land uses, are we able to assume the quarry will become a water-filled?
You can assume whatever you want. This is your committee. You can do whatever you wish. It's not up to me to decide. The issue is the quarry is an ongoing, non-conforming use. It'll go on, they tell me, 30 years. The golf courses are for sale now. And so if you make that assumption, that would be fine for the purpose of this committee.
And if we
But
put 250 homes in there now, they're going to be there when the quarry ends.
yes.
Yes, so we ought to think about what the
Yep.
quarry is when it ends.
I'm okay with that. I just can't have detailed conversation. Otherwise, I'm not doing my job. Because that was clearly out of the scope of the committee. And so we have to honor that.
Okay. I got it.
Can I make one suggestion? Is it appropriate for this committee to vote on an assumption so that we can stop talking about the quarry?
Yeah, maybe that's the way.
Or can we agree that the quarry is going to operate for 30-plus years and then eventually be a lake like Manitou Lake? And if we all agree on that, then we can stop
I'd like
talking
to
about
get
this.
some over here. I'd like to be heard. I guess.
Yeah, where's the talking stick here?
Yeah.
I'm going to pass it down.
Yep. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, I'm Neil Madden. I would not assume that the quarry,
Sure you're, yeah, good.
I would not assume that the current quarry, when its life is over, assuming 30 years, would be a town recreation area. I think this would be, I think anybody would tell you this would be dangerous. You know, the depth of that thing, it's not like it's sloped, and no one in their right mind would make that into a recreation area. It's a huge liability. It's going to be a huge liability for, Dolomite if they continue to own it afterwards. So I certainly wouldn't sit here and say, I couldn't sit here and say, oh, whenever it's done being a quarry, it'll be a really good recreational asset for the town. I don't see it, no.
Okay, so I'd like to make a proposal here, Carrie. I would like to say the suggestion to take a vote has validity, but it's too early.
Can you tell us when it's approved?
I would say before, you're going to, one of the things that we talked about in the agenda is you're going to come up with a work plan and processes, and Carrie pointed out the idea of matrices against which you would evaluate and a matrices against which you'll decide, and how the committee will come up with a recommendation. I believe that you will know after about 2 more meetings when it's appropriate to do that.
How many more meetings do we have?
We scheduled a total of 4, and there were going to be 3 before the public information meeting, which the intention is for a representative of the committee to say, here's what we've done so far, and here's the direction we're heading, but we're open to hear what the town residents as a whole, who were not selected for the committee, would like to have. After that, would like to say an input. After that, you'll finalize your recommendation in the month of July and send it in. And it's not, it's not your responsibility to take all their things and change you're the committee. The town has asked you for your input. So I think it's
How many more do we have? We have 4 more? 3
They're
more?
up on the screen.
no, yeah.
We have 5 more after this.
But the public one doesn't count.
Yes. The the reason that there's uncertainty about the numbers is my agreement is for 4 meetings with you. So there may be 5, there may be 6, there may be 8 if you decide to meet. You may be meeting alone. The town may ask me to come if they want. That's why I'm loose on the number. Before the beginning of last week, there were going to be 4 committee meetings and a public information meeting. And that was, but this one has been inserted, and the committee may decide to insert another or more after that. But that's really your decision. Okay. So I'm just suggesting we postpone the vote, Sam, until we figure out how you're going to work first, and then what the alternatives are, and then if you decide, let's do that, and we can put that on the I'll put that on the bin list for tonight. We'll stop short of the end, and we'll say, are you ready to vote, or do you want to postpone it for another meeting or so? Okay? Other new information for the benefit of the committee from the committee. Carrie?
Just an alternative, I'm sorry, I don't know if I have the talking stick
Yes.
in order to be speaking.
Thank you.
Now it's official. Another option to think about with, I know the quarry is an area of concern, that might be something that we add as one of the evaluation measures, or that you can phrase it how this scenario interacts or is affected by the quarry as is, or how the quarry, or how this development or this scenario is impacted if the quarry were to change to something else. And at that point, the something else could be something that the scenario contemplates. Do you know what I mean? So that you then have some flexibility and you don't have to have a very defined future scenario. You can just evaluate each use of the properties that we are asked to look at against what it is, what's there right now, and what's going to be there for the next 30 years, give or take, and then how that scenario would be impacted if the quarry would change. So then it takes the onus off us having to be future, to have the crystal ball to know exactly what's happening, because we have no knowledge.
Would you pass Jack to talk to Sam?
Since everything comes down to dollars and cents, my question basically is, do we have a pretty good idea of what the value of that land is and how much it could have been sold for had it been sold? Is it in the neighborhood of $4 million?
Are you talking about the pines?
Yeah, just the pines.
I would say that it's more in the mid to low 3 millions. That's a kind of a guess based on what I've heard from them.
So I would
Originally,
think
it was 4 to 5 million when they started that.
whatever we think about here, I think we've got to think of it in terms of low to mid 3 millions.
For what purpose? For
For
something else?
however it's going to move, it's going to be sold at some point.
But the price of that property would vary greatly depending on what's allowed to be put on it. So where a developer might come in and spend north of $4 million, somebody coming in as a golf course or as another type of business would pay significantly less because of the ability to
Well, that's
recoup
kind of
that
my
money.
point. That's
Yeah.
my point. I mean, Old Castle has a number on it. It's kind of like selling your used Lexus. You know, if it's worth $20,000 and somebody wants it for 12, you don't sell it. You go someplace else and sell it for 20. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. There are people in this room that are much more versed on the concept of highest and best use, which is a real estate term of what the price would be. And it's exactly as Craig says. What is the highest and best use of that property given the zoning and its future potential? And that really is downstream of the outlining what the alternatives are. And I assume you'll have a line that will, when you talk about, when I refreshed you on the charge, the implementation steps are there as to, so how would we do this? What's your vision of the implementation
I guess
step?
my point would be to say something like the town should buy this for $1 million. you're whistling up a smokestack.
Well, that's an interesting point, Jack, because I think in the work of the committee, you're going to come down to an important conversation about what is important for the town and what is implementable, and what compromise or consensus about recommendations can you get to. Because there probably are people in the room who say, buy them both, open space, both times, nothing else will work for me. And there's others who say, well, what's really realistic? And there may be some middle ground, which I'm not predicting, in the middle that the committee says, well, I can buy into that. But that is really the result of your work. That is the result of the important conversations, which I call creative abrasion, that will happen in the conversation. Okay, other new information from the committee for the good of other members. Yes, Bob.
I made some.
And then to Jim.
I made some contact with two of the cemeteries, Oakwood and Whitehaven, because that's potentially one of the suggestions, and I have some information when it's appropriate.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, Jim.
With regard to whether it might be feasible for someone to acquire Shadow Pines and operate it as a golf course, can we have information regarding Oldcastle's revenue, their tax bill, et cetera, for Shadow Pines? That kind of information probably was in the prospectus of the company they hired to try to market the property. I was reluctant to sign in to that website, but apparently one could do that. I Googled and found it. I just didn't want to put my name out there as someone who was a prospective buyer so that I could see all that information. It seemed like that might not be appropriate, but...
I can answer that for you.
Okay.
To the best of my knowledge, the tax revenues on Shadow Pines are, all four properties, the Clark House and all of them, around $80,000 a year. Okay, that's the tax bill for the four properties. And in terms of getting the financials, that's a no. At one point, they were going to give them to me when I asked, and then they've since said no, and then they started selling off the equipment. And then, what was your third question?
Well, I'm just trying to get a picture of whether it could be
They don't
operated
have
with
the
a profit.
financials up there because under the two golf courses you looked at, you could sign up and get the pro formas and the financial statements. The Pines, to the best of my knowledge, has always said highest bid, I believe.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, of course, it makes sense for them to try to get the highest dollar value. But, you know, I guess one of my pet thoughts would be, could we find a way to reduce the tax bill? You know, similar to what Comida does on other projects, could we find a way to reduce the tax bill and make it possible to run the golf course at a profit?
So that's a great question, thank you. And in the evaluation, I'm sure you'll look at that. Other information from the committee to other committee members. Okay, Ray?
I was interested in, and we've met with several of the guys as well during this last week, about exploring keeping the back nine as a 9-hole course and finding other uses such as a senior living facility, possibly comparable to Legacy or the Highlands in Pittsford, which might have less traffic implications. But we haven't had a chance to talk with Mark IV as to other constructions who do that to see if they're interested in the property. But we will pursue that between now and the next meeting.
Awesome.
But I also talked to Fritz Odenbach, because I wanted to know if he'd be okay with the 9-hole course. He's totally against the 18, and he's ready to, he's already signed the letter of intent, would continue to take care of Shadow Lake. So we know that's going to continue as a golf course, except that the moratorium applies to his property, or the Shadow Lake, as well as Shadow Pine. He can't understand why we don't just apply the moratorium to Shadow Pines since he's ready to move ahead with his process. And I'm not sure at some point whether we should consider that, but he'd be more amenable to being flexible if he could get his way, but he really doesn't want to see an 18-hole course over on Shadow
Pines.
Pines. He's made that clear.
Good information.
Doesn't think the economics support the 2 golf courses.
Thank you. That's valuable input. Other input for the good of the committee?
I guess I'd like to follow up on that thought about the senior living. Someday I'll be old. I'm not willing to accept that I'm old at this point, but when I am, I would like to have a kind of a senior project where most of my maintenance is taken care of, but I could go out and play a few holes of golf and walk my dog. It seems to me that that's a real possibility here, that we could have a sort of a cluster development where we would have very, very small footprints of homes or apartments. I would favor probably apartments. It would appeal to seniors. They would have the beauty of the area. They would maybe have a very small executive-style golf course nestled in among the apartment buildings. That way we'd have the preservation of open space, we'd have the recreation for the residents of the area, and we wouldn't have a high density of 250 homes plopped down on this beautiful open area.
So I'm imagining that that reflects the draft scenario about offering mixed uses on a single facility.
Exactly.
Okay.
That may make Clark House viable again as a restaurant.
Okay. Welcome. Did you get your tag?
No,
Okay.
I'll get it.
Okay. As part of our wellness program, you get to walk over there again. Okay, so is there any other pieces that you want to offer for the good of the committee? How about from the town? Anything, new learnings the past week that you would want the committee to know before we start deliberations? Thanks, Heidi.
The only thing is, we did talk about a site tour, and we never really followed through as to what, I'm sorry. We did talk about a site tour.
Zach is very prideful of his own mic.
It's not on yet.
Some people suggested that they've been on the course many, many times and didn't need that. Others think that they should. We are more than willing to set that up for the committee at its convenience. We just need to know who wants to go and when they want to do it.
Okay, so could we have a show of hands, who's interested in a site tour of the Pines? So we have Carrie, we have Heidi, we have Mike. Can you, somebody at the town take note of this? We have Carrie, Heidi, Mike, Dan, Jim. You haven't been out there, Jim? No, I'm just teasing. Ann,
It's illegal.
Jim, Wayne, Art, Todd, Sam. So about, I'm sorry, Neil and Don, I apologize. So I guess it's fair to say about 17 people have said yes.
Very good. What we'll do is we'll contact everybody and try to set something up for everybody.
Okay.
Then get back to everybody. If, we'll put several dates together for you.
So what time of day would this happen if we leave here, so Jim tries to set this up, what time of day would work for most people?
Could be during the week, after work. It could be on a weekend day, Saturday or Sunday if you wanted. It doesn't matter to us.
Not Memorial Day weekend.
No.
Right.
So would it work after work on a weekday?
If it's good for everybody here, we'll do whatever we can to accommodate.
And we're
Depends on,
coming into the 3 good months we have, so I don't,
is it possible to have 2 waves go out or no?
Possibly.
Just because I know that my schedule changes depending on gymnastic meets and track schedule, and I don't, so.
Yeah, we'll do it
And I know
whatever
we have
can to
coaches in the
accommodate.
room
If we need
that,
to do it 2 or 3 times, we can do that.
okay, so Jim, for your homework, why don't you look at after work weekday and a weekend slot?
That would be like a Saturday morning or something like that.
Okay, and then you'll, what would you have for expectation for timing to cascade that out, Jim? Is that a week or?
I'll try and contact them tomorrow if we can. And
Okay.
then get back to everybody as quickly as possible. We'll throw out 3 days, and if you can jump on one of the 3 days, that would be great.
Okay, so perhaps by Friday night, you could let people know?
Yes.
Okay.
Hopefully
Friday
before
night,
the-
great.
If that doesn't happen, it's only because we haven't made contact.
Okay. Well, I'm going to get back to the town. Any more information from the town for the benefit of the committee members?
Just a question, does anybody have a need to walk Shadow Lake?
Do it every day.
The question was, does anybody have a need to walk Shadow Lakes?
My
Okay.
thought is because it's still
don't
open,
have
it's
to organize
open, you
that.
can sort of
You
do
could-
that
right,
on your own.
okay.
Okay.
So that's a moot issue. Okay, any other learnings from the town before we start moving on? Okay. Bob?
Two thoughts about maybe potential resources. One is, since we all read the comprehensive plan, and it showed that this was, Shadow Pine, Shadow Lake was designed to be recreational, or hoped to be recreational sanctuary use, indicates there's an intent there to have it reserved as open space, which would require a zoning change. And I think there's been some hints that changing zoning is difficult at best and risky probably when the property's up for sale as single-family homes. So at some point, we're going to come to a place where some of us are going to be recommending a zoning change. Maybe we should have some guidance from our town attorney or somebody from the zoning department to inform us on what the considerations would be.
You certainly could request or recommend a zoning change. You have every right to do that. You should also be aware that our current zoning does allow for recreation activities, and it's primarily up to the Zoning Board of Appeals in this case as to what they may be. If you look at our zoning code now, there are certain things such as, they call them private playgrounds. There's no specific definition of what that might be, but you might have somebody that comes in with a recreational activity or activities that we might find to be appropriate under the current zoning and could be granted a conditional use for that purpose. You could limit the types of things that you want to see on the site through a new zoning ordinance, if you wanted to do that, through a new zoning district. You have options, and that's the purpose why we're here, is so that you can start making recommendations for that, through that process.
The second thing was, just as a resource, I was made aware recently that there's something called the open space plan that the town has, and I think we should familiarize ourselves with that also.
Okay, thank you. So I noticed there's a typo on your agenda, and I don't know whether it's my mistake or Anna's, but number 3 is review and refine scenarios, number 4 is the work plan. So it says A, but that really should be 4. And then there's 3 parts under the work plan. So we have come to the point where we need to get some more clarity. If I'm always focused on continual improvement, and if, sorry?
Fixed.
Thank you.
What are you talking about?
That is a crack staff, that's good. So if I thought back again about last meeting, what I wish I had said instead of we, because I did run it by folks, but really those draft scenarios were mine. They were my vision of how to do that. And when I said we, people thought that I was assuming we as a committee had done it. Those were my first shot as a non-context Penfield person to do that. Tonight is where we transfer the straw dog rough draft that I did, and we make it yours. And so without any pride of authorship, we can change anything and everything about those scenarios that you want to define as these are the scenarios that we want to look at. So if we could pull that up. I'm sure you've got it. There we go. Awesome. And if we could upsize the font about twice as much, Zach, please. Excellent. Okay, so those were the seven that I envisioned. And the floor is open, and this is really important work because this is really establishing the vision for your work plan. This is what you're going to work on. So the floor is open to what you think about that. And our goal is to get to something that you can live with for scenarios as quickly as you feel you can get there. But certainly before we adjourn tonight. Who'd like to start it off? Who'd like to start the bidding off? Okay, Carrie.
One of the suggestions I had or thought about is, so that's very clear, would be, instead of saying one this and one that, to name the scenarios based on what's happening at each of the two parcels in question. So scenario one, if it's Shadow Lake is going to continue as a golf course, and Shadow Pines is going to do this. Scenario two is Shadow Lake is going to not be a golf course and is going to do this, and Shadow Pines will do, like, so that each scenario specifically calls out the action or the intent, the future potential use at the specific parcel. So there's no confusion about, oh, no, I thought my scenario, we were talking about Shadow Lake doing this, and you guys were doing the other one. So it's very clear as each scenario assigning the future development or preservation or some combination thereof to the specific course in question in each one.
Yeah.
That was my only suggestion.
And I'm
I
not
was getting confused by the one is this and one's that, and then I'm like, well, which one? Because that matters.
Yeah, well, I came into this with a prejudgment that this was all about the Pines, and that because of the pending sale, there was no need to talk about the lakes. And as we got into it, people said, well, you're really, that's very engineer of you, and that you really, the committee should really decide. That was engineer humor, only Ann got it. Jim is thinking about it. That you really should let the committee decide how you want to do that. So Carrie is saying that the scenarios really should call out the facilities by name as to what they might be or not be. Is that, do I understand the suggestion? The danger with that is if somebody thinks, well, I think they should be reversed long-term for the health of the town, is that you're going to end up with more scenarios. If 2/3 of the people think that Pines is for development and Lakes is forever golf, somebody might think that really from looking at the town they should be reversed, and so then you'll have one into two. Okay, we got to get the phones around. So we're talking about, and to try, that's one of my jobs is to keep you on track. We're talking about Carrie's suggestion first as to whether to name them. Thanks.
And to take off of that, I mean, just from last week and what I'm hearing so far, I think we're all in agreement. Again, I don't want to make an assumption that the lake is going to be a golf course. Can we agree on that so we can move forward with the Pines?
Yeah, I was going to suggest a straw
Can we
vote on that.
just to get things moving? I mean, if everyone is in agreement, then we fall back.
I think this would be an appropriate time to do that.
I'd like you to lead that, please.
Okay. So I'm going to ask, is there anyone who can't support that? Neil can't support it?
Well, I'm assuming it's going to be, but the details would be, okay, if we're saying that's going to stay a golf course forever, are we then suggesting some way of locking it up? And let me tell you, personally, I don't, that's not my philosophy. But I mean, I guess the possibilities are we're going to kind of create some golf course zoning and make the owners continue to operate it. And no one can make anybody operate it if it's not working. So, I mean, philosophically, I have problems with that, but I certainly like the assumption that we should spend most of our time on Shadow Pines, because that seems like the 50-yard target, incoming enemy as opposed to the 350-yard target. You shoot the 50-yard target first.
Well,
Yeah, okay, so,
my assumption was, we all would agree that we would like, and we would present that the lake would somehow stay a golf course.
okay, Carrie, 1 minute, please. So, is there anybody else who couldn't support Art's idea? Art's support of Carrie's idea?
Can we just get a little clarification on exactly what it is that we're supporting? Because my interpretation is we're being asked to support the assumption that in the near term, say the next 5 to 10 years, Shadow Lake will be a golf course, so that we can focus our energy on looking at Shadow Pines, and then as part of this process, we might make a recommendation about how the town should approach keeping Shadow Pines as a golf course. But the assumption is it's going to be a golf course for the immediate term, and we're going to focus more of our effort on looking at Shadow Pines. Is that what we're
I
being
think
asked
it's
to support?
even simpler than that, and I'm just going to try to say, I heard you say, can we call them out by name, so we know what we're talking about?
Correct, but then
different.
Art's, in Art, based on what Art said, under the Shadow Lake column, if you will, if you're going to sort of divide this up, every scenario would say golf course, golf course, golf course, golf course.
Well, that's right.
But it's a golf course.
Right, taking in Neil and Sam's thought, it's going to be a golf course, we need to get there, though.
Yeah, there are
The other
input.
thing you
Golf
could
course.
look at is, it's going to be a golf course, and then, in no matter what scenario you might talk about, if the golf course were to become unviable in the future, this is what the town recommends, or this is what this committee recommends happen there. But let's not spend so much time redesigning that parcel.
Okay, so in order to move ahead on this, what I heard, your original explanation is that we call the property by their name. And so you said, obviously, it would be preserve Shadow Lakes as a golf course and allow Shadow Pines to be residential in the straw one, okay? That's one. That's just one, okay? And somebody said, no, I actually would like it reversed, and so it would be, 2 would be to do the opposite if somebody said, I wanted that to happen. But you would call them out by name so you knew exactly what you're talking about. Okay. So, yes, Craig. The magic wand.
I agree with Carrie. I think we need to clarify that, what the capabilities of the two properties are, because they're completely different. They're not interchangeable in terms of their uses. Shadow Lake has better restaurant facilities, wedding facilities, 27 holes, paddle tennis facilities, tennis, beach volleyball, and most of those facilities don't exist at the Pines, which is one of the reasons why Shadow Pines is not capable of turning a profit as a golf course, but Shadow Lake is, if you generically call it a golf course. It's all the other things that come together that make Shadow Lake able to be run profitably.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is kind of test out Carrie's assumption and Art's second of it, and recognize, Neil, philosophically it doesn't work for you, but we're on the pyramid of the priorities, and me is you at the bottom, okay?
That's right.
Okay. So, I didn't hear a lot of other resistance to that, so we're going to move ahead with that, at least for the next few minutes, until we get clarity of this. So, I'm assuming number 2 is preserve Shadow Lakes as a golf course and allow Shadow Pines to be developed in another use? Is that number 2?
I think that's too broad, in my opinion.
Okay, as resident, oh, so you want it more specific.
Well, we heard one scenario of half of it being senior living and the other half being an executive golf course.
Yeah, that's actually
That's the-
6.
Could be.
So
Oh.
exactly to Carrie's point, that's why.
Right.
Ron.
Okay.
Yes.
I agree with Art. We need to separate Shadow Lakes from this equation so that we don't get all of these other alternatives all jumbled up with Shadow Lakes. It sounds like as a committee, we can make a determination on Shadow Lakes, and there's really only two choices on Shadow Lakes. Assume that it's going to stay a golf course as it's currently zoned, or assume that it's going to stay a golf course and rezone it as such. If Shadow Pines was rezoned as such when it became a golf course, we wouldn't be sitting here today. So those are the two alternatives with Shadow Lakes. I think, maybe I'm wrong, I'm getting a sense that most people here are in favor of leaving Shadow Lakes as a golf course. So that's part one. Did I say that right? Okay. And then part two is, do we rezone it or not? And then Shadow Lakes is off the table entirely. We can focus on the 7 alternatives for Shadow
Yeah.
Pines.
And part one is about defining what that scenario is. And part
Well,
two.
there's 2 scenarios for Shadow Lakes. Shadow Lakes is a golf course,
Yes.
maintaining current zoning. Shadow Lakes is a golf course, rezoned as such.
Okay. Yes, but it is in the implementation of your recommendation. I'm just trying to get the title of it first. In both cases, as you pointed out with clarity, Shadow Lakes is a golf course. And I'm trying to, we have 7 up here. I'm trying to do the classic nibbling theory of negotiation. I'm trying to define the first part of the sentence of number 2. What would the first part of the sentence of number 2 say?
I understand, but what I'm saying is, I think what Art was saying, correct me if I'm wrong, let's take Shadow Lakes out of these alternatives entirely.
But there is the 2 underneath it, but yes, let's.
You're trying to combine them together by having preserve Shadow Lakes as a golf course and allow something other to happen to Pines.
I think you two are saying the same thing. You're saying it at a deeper level than he
I'm saying
is.
take it off the table entirely. That's all
Well,
I'm
it
saying.
can't be off the
That's
table,
what Art was saying.
well, no time, it can't be off the table entirely because
Take
you're
it off the table for
charged with
negotiating
giving a
this.
recommendation on it.
I'm saying take it off the table for future discussion. We've already kind of agreed, or not, I guess we have to have a vote on it, so that we're not muddling up these alternatives with Shadow Lakes. We already kind of know what we want to do with Shadow Lakes, or maybe we don't. I guess that's where the
Well, we're
vote's
not taking it
for.
off the table, we're just gonna set it off to the side. It's quasi agreed upon. We've got 2 other scenarios to pick from. It's either A or B. But it's sort of minimized in the conversation, and we can jump in, with both feet into the Pines.
Yeah,
Two
we're
lists.
getting bogged down in semantics, okay?
Well, I hear
The
what you're
committee,
saying.
the committee has to make a recommendation on both. If you would like, let me just suggest this, if you would like to have the scenario 0, keep Shadow Lakes as a golf course and pull it out of that, then it could be that, and you're assuming, and I didn't hear anybody screaming, that the committee is aligned around keeping Shadow Lakes as a golf course. It isn't that you have to do, if you look at the charge and your invitation to be on the committee, it isn't about sending one recommendation. It says recommendation or recommendations.
I agree.
So if the no-brainer one, if it's really clear, no-brainer one is Shadow Lakes is a golf course, and there are implementing steps in your recommendation about what you want to do to keep it as a golf course, then it can be pulled out, and then you can spend your time on Shadow Pines, if that's how you choose to do it. Or, conversely, you'd like to handle it how, Dan? Eliminate it from scenarios?
You have two columns. You have the Shadow Lakes column and you have the Shadow Pines column. We've already decided on Shadow Lakes. Let's focus on the Shadow Pines.
May I make just a suggestion? Correct me if I'm wrong, we're going to utilize this to break into committees.
Yes.
Okay. I would suggest one committee be Shadow Pines is a golf course. Do we keep it as is, or do we rezone it? That's one committee. Shadow Lakes, thank you, sorry. Just confuse you more. That's one committee. And then go on to this with Shadow Pines.
Sure.
I said yes too quickly. You haven't decided how you're going to do the work. But the concept that you've just put out, that you're looking at a recommendation that Shadow Lakes is a golf course, we're in alignment on, okay? You may, as we talked about last time, you may have individuals per committee, or you may have individuals per functional area across the recommendations. And the committee hasn't decided on that yet. Where's the talking stick? For Sam. Okay.
We keep talking about things and saying we're going to come back to them. Why can't we just take a vote if we all agree that the best recommendation for Shadow Lake is to be a golf course, and then we have a committee at some point to talk about how we make that happen? Why do we need to come back? If 20 people on the committee, 20 out of 20 want it to be a golf course, that's recommendation. Why do we have to wait 3 meetings to do it if we're all ready?
No, I'm not saying you have to wait 3 meetings to do that.
So can we do that?
Sure, you can do whatever you wish.
So how do we do that?
Yeah.
Do I have to make a motion?
Make a motion.
Yeah,
Second
Jim. But Jim,
Excuse me, I think you're trivializing Shadow Lake, because 5 years ago, nobody in this room would have thought Shadow Pines was not going to be a golf course.
That's not what we're saying.
What I'm saying to you is
Misinterpret
that there's a situation where you could rezone the property to golf course. I mean, you could create a golf course zoning district, but if there's no market for a golf course at Shadow Lake in 5 years, it doesn't matter what it's zoned. You still have a vacant, defunct golf course there. So I do agree. I think you should be focusing primarily on Shadow Lake, Shadow Pines. Shadow Lake's something that a group could get together and say, we expect it to be a golf course for X number of years. At the end of its life as a golf course, these are some of the recommendations that could occur to make sure the property is viable and still an asset to the community. But I do agree, you should be looking at Shadow Pines as a primary function. But you can't dismiss
Sam, I
Shadow
don't
Lake.
think we're that far off. If you want to get the airtime of Shadow Lakes off the agenda and move on.
Not just me.
No, I'm not calling you out, okay? I'm suggesting you put scenario 0, Shadow Pines remains a golf course. Shadow Lakes, I'm sorry. Shadow Lakes remains a golf course. I think that there's great support in here, and then let's move on. That's the first scenario. It's the no change alternative for Shadow Lakes.
One quick question.
Okay.
You guys were done. Okay, you're saying you could rezone this Shadow Lake as a golf course?
Theoretically, I mean, if it's in the community interest to do that.
Theoretically.
That's right, you could recommend it to the town board.
Okay.
The town board could create a new zoning
And the
district.
Oldmont family is just going to let that happen?
No, that's a big leap.
No, nothing, I don't think that the owners, and I don't know any of the owners, but if you own property that's worth millions of dollars, I don't think anybody is just going to let anything happen. This is about a select citizen committee making a recommendation to the town board for them to deliberate on it, along with the public
There is people in this room that think they can make that happen.
There may be, but first we have to decide what it is. And I'm sensing that there is desire to have that, get that off the table and say that's a scenario. We'll have to evaluate it according to the decision matrix that we have here, and there'll be clear implementation steps to try to make that happen, and it'll be part of the recommendation. So I'm suggesting that is there any support for saying scenario 1 or 0, whatever, is preserve Shadow Lakes as a golf course?
Sure.
So Zach, would you put that as number 1?
I'm a little uncomfortable with the word preserve, because that would imply that we do rezone it as a golf course use only.
No, it doesn't.
And that's going to, excuse me, that's going to limit the owners of the property. And if I were the owner of the property, I would not want to be limited.
That was my point exactly.
Yeah.
Well, there's going to be, I can't imagine that there's any recommendations that are going to come up that somebody's not going to be limited. The issue is, this select committee was called to give recommendations that they would believe would be wise for the town of Penfield. That's why you're sitting here. It's a diverse group to come up with the best recommendation they can before the town has to deliberate on some very important issues, all of which, I believe, will have some consequence to somebody.
I guess what I'm saying is that we have to be respectful of the current owners you can't reach into their pocket by denying them the right to do other things with their property. And while we would all like to see it remain a golf course,
Yes.
I think it's incumbent upon us to come up with recommendations that would make that viable, rather than to impose a new zoning on that golf course.
I hear you. And that gets back to the conversation we had at the beginning of people, of where the idealists are and where, this is what we can do. I suspect that wisdom for this committee is to find some kind of compromise in between, but that'll be your decision and conversation. Mike is up.
I agree with virtually what everyone is saying, so we just need to find a way to move on. I agree. It will be hard to rezone Shadow Lake, but a small portion of us need to look at that because we're charged with, does it stay exactly the same as it is now? Or what are the ramifications if we create a new zoning district that's recreation or whatever it is? That may never ever happen. But there's two properties that are under consideration, and it comes back to where we started here. There's two scenarios there. It gets rezoned or it stays exactly zoned what it is now. And our role here is to make sure that we look at all the options and do what's best for everyone. You know, we're going to make bigger suggestions for Shadow Pines.
The role is to make a recommendation that this committee believes is wise for the future of the town of Penfield. And Jim, I don't disagree with you that would be unfair to disenfranchise somebody, but I'm pretty sure the legal system will assure that that's not the case. Okay, because no matter what happens here, there will be folks involved to ensure that their rights are done. And so I hear you saying, I'm uncomfortable in making a recommendation that disenfranchises somebody from their rights. That's noble, but the committee is really called for the town to look to protect the future of town residents and not any one individual that's involved, as I understand it, as it's been explained to me. Okay. We're going, I'm sorry, Ray.
Having talked with Fritz Odenbach, I'd make a recommendation that we offer him the option of removing the moratorium on Shadow Lake under the condition that there's a right of first refusal for the town to buy back the property at the end of its cycle as a golf course at a price no higher than what he paid for it. If the town doesn't choose to buy it and make it a park or use it for some other purpose, then he has freedom to use it. We don't have to rezone it as long as the town has the right to buy it back. And right of first refusal at a price that's already established.
So from a process check, the number one would continue Shadow Lake as a golf course. The how, or the implementing steps, could reflect exactly what you said. It's how do we make that happen? We're trying to describe what to call it. So that we can talk about the same thing. If we're talking about scenario one, then we can call it scenario one and everybody has the same lexicon. Okay, over here. Gary.
In thinking about this, perhaps the scenario should not, and I know I'm going to go back on what I just said, where I had the columns, but maybe because of the fact that there's a lot of consensus around the fact that not much is being proposed to change physically at Shadow Lakes, but maybe the future land use or development opportunities might be something that we want to think about. Why don't we have scenarios for Shadow Lakes, and there are 2 or 3. The one is continues as it is right now, and we make no change to the zoning. 2 is Shadow Lakes continues to operate as a golf course, and we make some change to the zoning. 3 is something Shadow Lakes operates as a golf course, and we stipulate what Ray just described, some variation of that. Then we look at Shadow Pines by itself, and we look at all the scenarios. We go back to each one, and the end of the report, or whatever we're giving, we're saying from the menu of ideas for Shadow Lakes, we think this one, based on these reasons. And for the menu of things that we had looked at for Shadow Pines, we think this one is the best and for these reasons. So that we're not combining them and we're looking at each piece on its own and looking at what's the best for that piece, given what we know in today's market, what we know about the current property and the values and all that good stuff, and it'll make it cleaner. And then from a work standpoint, whether we look at them all across and groups are focused on one issue, or whether we divide up based on the scenario, it's just an easier thing to get your head around.
I appreciate you using that word, because last week I told you that my role as facilitator was to make this process easy or easier. And that's what I want to try to do. It's pretty clear it won't be easy, okay? So the goal is to try to be easier. And so I'm wondering, so that we get something done on this definition, could you support shortening number 1 to Shadow Lake continues as a golf course, and let the committee who's doing that work out those 3 scenarios and come up with, think through what the approach is and the criteria that they have going forward?
Sure.
I'm asking the committee.
I agree with that, because I think we're getting really bogged down. I'm hearing on this one, all sorts of things. We're going to buy back the property, we're going to have lunch with Fritz, we're going to do all these things. And I'm like, that's not following the process. The process is it a golf, do we want to see it continue as a golf course? The subcommittee then gets down into the weeds. These are the different options to do it. So if you want to shorten it or rearrange the sentence, that's fine, but I think that's number 1, and then that's done, and move on to Shadow Pines.
Yeah, so I'm suggesting this is changed, Zach, to Shadow Lake continues as a golf course. Can you agree with that, at least to move through the rest of the list?
I don't.
You don't?
No, I was going to say, I don't think it's within our charge to say, stop the moratorium on such and such.
Yeah, exactly. And
Well, here's the deal. Don was absolutely right when he said we are being sucked down the rabbit hole of the subcommittee work. We've got large group doing small group work. And I guarantee you that when the small groups come back for meeting 3, you're not going to agree with everything that the small groups did. And we're going to try to be hard on the ideas and easy on the people, but they will have gone off and done what their heart said they were to do in good faith, but it'll be pulling it back together. So I would just say, let the group that's going to own this own what the ideas and the implementation is. Shadow Lake continues as a golf course.
Just a point of clarification, the moratorium does not prohibit golf courses to continue to operate or to go into operation. So for Fritz, he continues on as an operator, and if he wants to make improvements to the golf course as part of the process, he can do that. It only applies to other developments other than golf courses on those properties.
Okay, so that's the first scenario. What would the second scenario be? With the first, we've lost the other list.
Shadow Pines is residential.
Okay, Shadow Pines to be developed as residential would reflect number 2. What would you say about that?
Why limit it to residential?
Okay,
Because we're doing them in steps. Those 7 things. So that if you want a different one, it's down the next one.
So I think number 2, we're splitting out number 1. So we've said Shadow Lake is going to be a golf course. The second half of the original number 1 is Shadow Pines is going to be recreational or open space. Number 3 would be Shadow Pines residential, and then down through the list. Is that?
okay, so a separate one, number 2, would be Shadow Pines as recreational or open space. Okay? Zach? Okay, Jim.
Before we go too farther on this, one other thing that's kind of, I don't quite understand is when we got the letters when we came to the town back in February when this started, we put our names in for the committee. We got letters saying we're on the committee. There was some stuff posted about the laws and the moratorium and everything. And then we were asked to familiarize ourselves with the 2010 master plan and the some kind of zoning document put up there. And I would like to see this committee, because I think most of the people that came here, and I can't speak for everybody, but I think at least a few of us are on this committee because we've lived around the property. We had certain expectations. I've been there for 31 years, so I can't say this, but many people bought houses thinking they bought into a mature area, and many people didn't know about the quarry when they bought their houses, okay? So one of the things I would like to suggest we do is, as we talk about this, in the documents they gave us, they talk about the master plan, how much time we spend on that, how many awards we've won, how we have all this open space, okay? And there's nothing about half the stuff we're talking about in the master plan, okay? The master plan calls it, I don't know, it's recreational and something, it's not open space. Sanctuary, okay? So why aren't we exploring those first and spending the majority of our time on that, and then doing other for old people's homes, for mixed use and all these other things? I don't understand that part of why we're talking about all these things we might be able to do when the town has a rich history of following the master plan, which started in 1966. I don't understand why we're talking about all these other things.
Okay, so I want to stay focused here, because we've had 60% of our time go so far, and we have defined 1.5 alternatives. Okay, we've decided to find 1.5 scenarios. So at this rate, we'll be here till 11:30. So that's a really good, important point about what needs to be done going forward. The issue here is, if I take your comments, would then this be recreation, open space, or sanctuary for the Pines?
I'm okay with what you have right there. I'm just saying, as we go down this list, if we have 5 subcommittees,
yes,
I believe 4 of them should match up with the master plan, what the master plan has said we should be doing.
Well, then that's a good alternative. Let's figure out what we're going to investigate first. And I let you go because I know you are passionate about this and you have put a ton of time into it. So that's why I wanted you to have the opportunity to express that, Jim. But we got to define what these scenarios are, and hopefully more quickly than we have done the first 2. So the question is, are we okay with number 2, Shadow Pines? Okay. Well, okay, Laura's not okay with it, Neil's not okay with it.
Well, to Jim's point, I agree. I think that is a part of our charge, to look at the comprehensive plan and follow through what Penfield's vision for our area was in 2010. So why not put that in the verbiage to say, you know, follow through with master plan for Shadow Pines or something, have the words master plan in, or comprehensive plan, in one of these bullet items, because that's what I feel like we're here to do.
And you may decide to do that. I'm just trying to describe them, not what you're going to do, just to describe.
No, that's what I'm saying, in the description of one of these line items.
So Laura is saying to modify the number 2?
Yes.
To say in accordance with the master plan. That's what, so Craig says, Neil says, and then Craig.
Well, I was just going to say that, you know, master plans are out there. Yes, it's a lot of work putting one together. I think that's more of, this would be nice, this is what we would like to see. And of course, it's easy to assume that the status quo will continue. So at the time the master plan was done, Shadow Pines was open space, recreational, etc. But legally, the only thing that counts is the zoning code, and that hasn't changed. So to say that this, I mean, I'm just saying that it's it's out there, it's nice, but, we've got to deal with the current zoning, and we also have to deal with reality, which is, and again, I'm sure the people preparing the plan assume the status quo for Shadow Pines would continue forever. And folks in the neighborhood, in my neighborhood, I assume the status quo will continue forever. I think that's a dangerous assumption. It isn't reality, because we all know that the only thing that stays the same is change happens. And, but Ron, I couldn't be in favor of this as the ultimate determination, but if we're just talking through all the scenarios.
We're trying to be able to refer to scenario 2 and have everybody know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
In concept.
I know what you're talking about.
Okay. Good, because most of the time I don't. Okay, Sam?
I think the reason the master plan is relevant is if you look at the legal advice that has come from the state regarding spot zoning, you can change the zoning much easier if it's in accordance with what the state calls a comprehensive plan. So perhaps we need to share that document with everyone on the committee so we can understand it. But one of my questions to the town would be, do we believe that the 2010 master plan, that we call it, would be considered a comprehensive plan on the state that would be viable to support spot zoning?
Well, I don't like to use the word spot zoning, because spot zoning is not legal in New York State.
Okay, but that's what's referenced.
But you're
in the
right, though, the
document.
comprehensive plan, if first of all, as Neil says, and he's been around a long time, probably longer than I have, but I've done 4 comprehensive plans in Penfield over a 40-year period. So comprehensive plans are guides. They're guidelines for the community to go through and identify uses that it thinks are appropriate for the community. The process of rezoning lands, that is what drives whatever the zoning is for that property. You could, in a comprehensive plan, identify lands for certain types of zoning, and if you go to rezone them after a period of time, and you've gone through public hearing processes to approve the master plan or adopt it, then you can go ahead and rezone the land as the master plan or the comprehensive plan recommends. That's exactly what's happening in Penfield right now with respect to our mixed-use districts. That was a process that came out of the comprehensive plan in 2010. But again, they are guidelines. There's 2 components to a comprehensive plan. There's the proactive, where you're saying this is what we'd like to see in the next 10 years. And there's the reactive, which is existing conditions. We expect them to stay the same way as they are. Sometimes that happens, and it's happened over a 30-year period for this golf course. But things do change, and as they change, you have to address that as part of the next process. That's kind of where we are right now, is trying to determine what to do with these lands for the next comprehensive plan.
So what we call a master plan would be considered a comprehensive plan by the
Yes,
state?
yes.
Okay, so I want to move this along. So there was a suggestion that we add some reference to the master plan or a comprehensive plan to number 2.
Make an alternative?
Okay?
We're going to list scenarios, and then we're going to list criteria.
Yeah, criteria.
I know, but one of the criteria could be whether or not these fit with the master plan.
Absolutely.
And to the way I think about it, that actually probably makes more sense.
It does to me. I would not box yourself in with tagging that onto the description, but it's your committee and your scenarios.
And more importantly, as it relates to the next comprehensive plan, how this is built into the next comprehensive plan for the next 10 years after that.
Okay, so we had a suggestion here. Is there support to add master plan here or not?
I move that we accept number 2 as it is.
Okay?
Go.
Is that kind of a consensus? Anybody not live with that? Well, we're going there. Number 3, what is the 3rd scenario that you'd like on the list? Okay, and say more, what would the title of it be?
Shadow Pines is allowed to be developed as residential property.
Okay, Shadow Pines be allowed to develop as residential property.
I don't mean to put too fine a point on it, but why don't we put down our preferences in order? I mean, residential, I think, would be the last choice for most of us.
I don't care what
It's just a
Okay, so Jim, hold me accountable. Let's get through the list. Everybody says it's done, and then we'll renumber them if we need.
Okay.
Okay? Okay, so Shadow Pines to be developed for residential. Dan says.
Shadow Pines to be developed as it's currently zoned.
That's residential.
Yeah, it is. So that will, yeah.
Making a distinction here,
Yeah.
as it's currently zoned.
Yes.
And I disagree with that for a specific.
The challenge is, Dan, people are going to read this, and you, because you are now trained up on exactly what is there, will know its current zoning. But there will be people who read this that won't know it. And in the description and the evaluation, it'll say, it's been zoned for residential since 1928. I mean, you will address that.
Well, we're going to break these down.
Yeah, if we get there, we will, yeah.
Yeah, so one could be as is, to B could be,
That's what I was
change
getting
it.
at, but okay.
Get A, B, C, or something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. So
I was thinking as currently zoned, and then number 4 is consider other zoning options. But if you want to do it that way, that's fine.
I think it should be as descriptive as it can be. That would be mine, but you guys decide. Dan has said, as currently zoned versus residential. What's your pleasure?
Why not just add after the word residential under R120 zoning? That's what it is.
Was that your thought process, or was it a different type of residential?
My only concern, or the reason I said it this way, is the town, although it didn't accept it to review it, has seen a specific proposal for 255 houses. I want to make sure that on this committee, we look at in detail what that means for the town. I don't want that to get lost. If we make sure that that is a sub-point under number 3 and we really evaluate that, that's fine. I wanted it separate because I think it's crucial that we really understand what that means to the town.
So if we describe it, Jim, as Shadow Pines to be developed for
Well,
R120.
right where we are, I'm just wondering, though, there are various types. There's townhouse development, there's single-family detached, there's apartments, there's all sorts of types of residential development. I just want to make sure, if you want to look at the various types of those residential developments and what kind of impacts they may have on the community, that's fine. But if you have in mind a certain, like, detached, single-family, I just have to clarify.
Okay, who feels they haven't had a say here? I want to pass this microphone around. Who?
Turn your...
Mike?
Craig. Turn around. Other way, I'm sorry.
Craig, and where are the mics? You guys aren't stealing the mics, are you?
Keeping the mics.
You got 2 mics up here. Guys, come on. What do you want to hear? Oh, that you don't?
Yeah, right there.
Okay, great. Go ahead, Craig.
Well, I just think in order to keep it moving, I think we should look at 3 to be consistent with what the proposal is from Dolomite or from the town for the 255 homes. And then number 4 would be more of a mixed-use, creative solution as an alternative to that.
Okay. So what would the descriptor be for 3?
Shadow Pines.
Single family, I think that's single family detached residences.
Yeah.
Half acre,
For 3.
single family.
R120.
But if you put in the title, R120 won't mean anything to most people.
Right.
But if you say single family,
homes.
half acre
Half acres.
lots,
Can I just, if we're that specific, then we need to have another scenario where we say it's residential on 1 acre lots, residential 2
No,
acre
other.
lots.
We can just say other at that point, because we want to go to the most permissive right now zoning, which is what your concern is, 255 houses. And then we want another one for other residential, whether it be combination of townhouses, condos, whatever it is, but something different so that we protect what you're worried about, because that's a reality.
Okay, so we get to move on. Can we say Shadow Pines should be developed for single-family residential?
Detached.
Single-family, detached residential. Can we Can we get it? I mean, this is not, we're not pouring concrete around this. I mean, the magic fingers of Zach can change this whenever you want, because these are your scenarios. If you don't like them, we'll change them. Okay, what would 4 be?
Some alternative mixed use.
Discussing on
The mixed usage, I like that with the number 6 where it talked about mixed usage, maybe with some classifications. You know, portion being recreational fields, open space, and then maybe light businesses versus the residential. I don't know as though another committee needs to look in there as the residential, but mixed usage, kind of leaving it open. I don't know what the piece.
So that's number 6.
Yes, so
Okay.
mixed usage. I don't know if you want to be specific and say mixed usage meaning recreational open space / residential,
if-
and mixed uses.
If it were my scenario, my committee, I would leave it simple like that.
Mixed
to give,
usage.
To give you the most running room.
Yep.
But I want to honor the issue is people saying, well, we need to have the evolution of this, and mixed use was different than what I heard other non-single family detached residents, which I heard over here. Okay, and I'm just checking that out.
But I think mixed use covers my concern.
Does it?
Well, I see it could be the residential other, but that could be not restricted. That could be the entire landscape that's available for development. I'd also like to see there be a residential clustered development or where it's a compact, you know, or a clustered development approach, because that's a very different looking
I was imagining that that was one of the,
other.
Mixed use.
yes.
Well,
No.
mixed use means multiple
That would
uses.
fall more under, that would fall more under 3, or as 4, to be more specific than 3, as cluster development as opposed to just a single, the current zoning.
Remember when we talked about cluster development last time? They don't get, if they're entitled to 250 units, whether they're single-family detached or they're attached as townhouses, you could then crunch up 250 townhouse units in one area. They could not develop any other areas other than those 250, which might leave you a lot of open space for the remainder of the property. So Carrie's right on target. We should investigate the town law 278, which is cluster development, as an alternative to single-family detached or even mixed use.
So if you were describing what you just said, it would be Shadow Pines to be developed for clustered development?
Yes.
Okay.
There's a Pride Mark development on Shoecraft that might be useful for people to look at, where we preserved a lot of open space through cluster development.
Okay, now to Art.
So I think I'm going to tag on to Heidi. I guess my thought would be to, you say mixed use, maybe take the back 9 parcel as open space and maybe mixed use on the other one, residential, whatever it may be. So that's why I take mixed use, is actually dividing the parcels.
Yeah, that was my intent. Now, you folks know more than I do about this. I was imagining that the cluster allowed 250 units with more buffer and open space on the property. That the mixed use was to say, we're going to take one facility and we're going to separate it up into several different uses that fit with the future of the town of Penfield.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of, really going on Jim's thought of working, with the owners. Okay, we want to keep.
No, I understand.
Keep back 9, town maybe can.
I really think that's the number 6 or whatever that we did have.
That's right.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Well, I think your staff is moving ahead. They got to 5, which is maybe where we're just complete 5. It says mixed use, in a mixed use manner, mixed use development. Because I think
The old number 6.
cluster and mixed use are 2 different things.
Okay.
I've got another scenario there.
So I was thinking you were saying you wanted to go down through these and kind of show the evolution, that the next one would be the cluster development and the next one would be mixed use.
Right, that's what I'm thinking.
Okay, until you agree to renumber them, which is fair game.
Well, you could just put a slash between the, 4 and 5 and make that 4, and then be back to 5 on your old list if you want to do that.
No, I think 4 and 5, the way they're written, are going to be a lot of work.
It is your list.
Yes, it is your list. Okay, so old list, Zach, have we mined off anything that they want on the old list? Do you want to have the do-nothing alternative, or just forget it, okay?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Are we implying that 3, 4, and 5 exist under our new number 3?
No.
Number 5 is a how.
Yeah.
I think that's a, how do we get there? So
Yeah.
I think what we've done is we've listed the possible outcomes, and then what we do about zoning would be a recommendation.
Right, so we're saying the same thing.
Right.
It's implied.
It's,
Okay.
yeah, it's how to. Okay, are there any other scenarios that you have passion for that you could see yourself wanting to volunteer for? Because a scenario where there's no passion is not really a scenario. Okay, so if we come back to that list, Zach?
You want to go back to the...
Yeah? Now, how about the order? I'm assuming you want 1 as 1.
Yeah.
2 through 5, are they in the order that you want?
I gotta ask.
Yeah.
If we're gonna break out into subgroups, does it really matter?
Should it be A, B, C, D, E, F?
I'm just asking the question. Because you're going to have a report. It's going to be on the website. I'm just asking.
But we're gonna break out in subgroups.
Absolutely.
Come up with solutions, all come back together with best solutions that we
Yes.
all feel, and then order them at that point?
Yeah.
Are we locked into this?
No, but it's also...
Here's the problem. There'll be
But they're
muscle.
not gonna see until we come back together.
There'll be muscle memory. People will begin to have lots of generative conversations about number 3. And then you come back when you renumber them, they'll be talking about number 3, and they're really talking about the new number 2, and we're going to waste precious meeting time to do it. So it's not a priority list, it's just to label them. And I'm just asking as your initial gut for labeling, Jim says.
I'd like to amend number 2. Let's put golf course in there.
That's recreation.
Well, it's recreation.
That would fall under recreation, wouldn't it?
Doesn't have to delineate.
I just think it ought to say golf course, because that's what a lot of us are here for.
Okay. So that's a suggestion by Jim.
I guess my only concern about that is that we already have a sensitivity that's been expressed by the Odenbachs with regard to continuing Shadow Pines as a golf course, and that kind of knocks out our number 1.
I don't think that's part of our problem. I don't think that's part of what we're tasked to do. We're tasked to come up with what to do with the, I mean, I understand what you're saying, okay?
Okay, so
I don't think
wanna-
we can say we're not going to have this as a golf course because somebody may or may not buy it.
So I want to keep us focused, and I know you're very passionate about the Pines. So I'm just going to ask a question. Jim has suggested that we add golf course to number 2. Is there other support in the room for that? And if there is so, then raise your hand.
It could be part of 5, mixed use. I mean,
Yes, it could.
someone, Jim said.
No, I think
that wasn't the
it's
question.
about
Yeah.
keeping the Pines as the Pines.
I thought number 2 was keep it as open space, that was the opportunity to tie it to what the comprehensive plan was suggesting, so that if you take number 2 and say keep it as a golf course, then you need another one to say...
No, I'm just saying add it to.
He's saying add it to recreation.
Or open space, which is what the
Yeah.
law calls it.
All right,
I'm
or
not
open
saying
space.
specifically, I'm just saying put the word in there.
I'm just saying that there's other types of open space other than golf.
Yeah, and he's acknowledging that. He's just saying, add golf course to number...
You put it correctly, is there support?
I asked, is there support? And so far, 1, 2... No, so this is only about, is there support for adding the word golf course in the title of number 2? That's what we're doing. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 out of 20 some.
Make that the committee.
What's that?
That should be the committee, those that support it.
Well, no, they can be the committee for that. The issue is about the title. I don't think you haven't got a consensus to add golf course. And golf course is allowable. And if you want to, you come back next meeting and you're passionate, we got to have golf course. I'm cool with that. We're not going to pour concrete around this. Okay? You've got until the end of July to have this final. But I don't think there's not a majority tonight. There could be in a future night. As you dig into it and you find more reasons why that should be. Okay, are those the scenarios? Okay. So, isn't this fun? Okay, so as you see on your plan, the issues of roles and responsibilities and systems and matrices and draft schedule, that is in how we're going to do the work. I'm wondering, though, whether we should kind of test the water here. Yeah, well, I guess I got to figure out how you're going to do the work first. The suggestion that just came up, well, it'll be on that committee. That makes the assumption that you have scenario committees that are moving things forward, as opposed to a more of a matrix where somebody does the environmental across the 4 scenarios. You see? There might be an organizing committee that would describe the parts and pieces of it, and somebody would evaluate all that. I'm sensing, let me just check this out, I'm sensing that you'd rather work in committees around a scenario. It is a simpler way to see the world, because then you've got 4 or 5 people that you just huddle with to get your work done before the next meeting. Yes. Yep, Sam. And then over here to Tom.
I think that could be a good way to work it, but we need to come up with some way to make sure that each scenario committee is not duplicating effort, because there's going to need to be, on any of these that include children moving in, we need to understand the impact on the school district.
Yep.
On any development, we're going to need to understand environmental. So that's great, but let's figure out how we're going to make sure that we're not all doing the same work over again, because we don't have time for all of us to redo work.
Yeah, what I wanted to add was, I may be wrong, but I don't see anybody really being passionate about number 3. And B, there are several, I mean, finances goes through all of this, impact on environment goes through all this, so I think we're looking more at a matrix here.
I don't think that any of us are passionate about number 3 coming to fruition, certainly. No, so I agree. From the perspective of knowing what that means is our baseline, because it's dollars and cents. So whatever that means, we need to know how these other options fit with, a development of 255 houses. So
that's the matrix, is what I'm saying.
So 3 is also not what's being proposed that we're in a sense reacting to. That's number 4.
Okay, so let's go ahead, Carrie.
The proposals are cluster.
Well, I think can all of us agree on what sort of issue or what topics that each scenario needs to address, so that there's consistency, so that each work group, as they're looking at it, say if we decide to break in by scenario, each group has to look at certain issues, topics, things, and address how that scenario would impact or what it would mean for those things.
Yeah,
That would sort of help feed into.
that would be a very healthy way to look at it.
So that there's.
I'm envisioning that we're going to have 5 scenarios, right? Yeah, even though this is the orphan. And there would be names here, but then there would be education, there would be infrastructure. In this matrix, there's going to be names up here, but there will also be names here. People who will be matrix evaluators that have special skills in environmental, who have special passion in educational issues or in financial analysis.
But I think it's important that in each scenario, you've got people who are pro the scenario, and you've got people who are not in favor of the scenario, because that's the most healthy way to look at it. You've got to always have the naysayer. If you have a group of like-minded people, you're not going to be able to poke holes in or look at the potential downsides of things. So I think when we structure ourselves, it's, or at least have somebody.
I'm 100% behind your concept. I would just suggest to you that the naysayers may be advocating for another scenario. So it's hard to get people to invest time if they're not passionate about it. But then when they get done with their small group work and they come back to large group, they know that there are going to be the rest of the committee that's asking them important questions about why you made that assumption and why you got there. And this is the whole group that will have to agree upon the recommendation. So Zach, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to give me some space between each scenario and start with number 1 and then tab in perfect. And I like to put names. There's going to be opportunity for names in 2 places. Names on a scenario, which I would like to go through and find out where everybody is on a scenario. And then names on this evaluation matrix of people who have passion for evaluating or special knowledge that want to be involved in that. Sam?
Don't we have to define what those criteria are first?
Yes, we do. But we will, yes. Yep. So Bob? No, just what I'd like you to do, Zach, it's the engineer in me. If you would just, A would be the first name. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no.
Like the name, we're going to type a name in.
AKA Jim Froome. Okay, if that was just an example.
I
Okay.
thought a name was coming, there was a long pause, and it was first name, maybe not.
Yeah. Okay.
Awaiting names.
Okay, so now remember, we'd like to have, number 3 may be an orphan, and I recognize that, but I'd like to have names, each person's name on a scenario.
Ron?
Yes.
May?
Yes, absolutely.
So John and I are here, and we've done before, and you'll notice we're pretty quiet, representing the school district.
Yep.
I said my very first day, I'm a resident as well, so I have my own residential feelings as a resident of Penfield, but we sit here as representing the school district. So before we start sharing names, I want to let you know that we've talked with the board and as representing the district is we're not going to sit on one of these subcommittees. The reason being, all of these subcommittees are going to want to know the educational impact, and I'm not really interested in sitting on 5 subcommittees. So our feeling really is that, there are a lot of assumptions, a lot of estimates, a lot of unknowns. There's none of these scenarios that the school district is going to provide you an exact number of your impact on your tax bill, an exact number of the impact on the budget. It's all estimates, assumptions, and unknowns because we're still dealing, for an example, with Windsor Ridge. We know there's 86 homes coming in. We're kind of working. We're building the plane as it's flying. I can't guarantee you what it's going to look like in 2 years. For all of these, there's zoning impacts. There's potentially a new school. There's the impact that if you're a Harris Hill family, you may no longer be a Harris Hill family. Those are all really scary things, but realities. But again, they're all based on a lot of unknowns and assumptions. So really, from the district's point of view, is we're here, and the reason why, I didn't have to fill out a form because we were invited to be here because any impact to Shadow Pines, if it means residential or homes, is going to be an immediate impact to the school district. And so the town and the school district works very closely together to be aware of those scenarios because we want to hear about it first so we can always be planning. We're doing a lot of planning around the what-ifs. The reality is, though, there's a lot of those what-ifs, and many people in this committee have already reached out to me or John or Dr. Sansucci or a business official trying to get to know the what-ifs, and we've politely declined many of those requests. And the reason being is, believe it or not, we still are trying to run a current school district and a current budget and prepare for a budget vote. And so trying to do all that's difficult. So I just want to, what I see our role here really is to be that provider of information for all of these committees. And so once the committees work out and they have the specific questions, that might be the educational impact, then I'm the conduit to the district, as John is to the board, to say, you know, what we can provide. We can look at information that you may already have. We can try to share some of those numbers, and we're ready to do that once we get the specific questions. The other piece is always you know, John, as the president of the school board, it would involve any sort of vote. You'll notice we probably don't vote on everything as people are here, because ultimately, you know, John would have to get the permission of the board to speak on behalf of the board.
Okay.
So it's a tricky situation, but I wanted to be fair as we start going through names why we're not going to join a subcommittee, because ultimately, I think just about every one of these, except Shadow Lake continues as a golf course, is going to have Shadow Pines continues as recreation, is going to have an educational impact, and we want to be able to support those subcommittees.
Sure. And I just wanted to add an echo that the board is also aware there will be something you can't figure in, and that's the emotional piece of an ultimate redistricting. And everybody hates that word, but we're almost on the verge of it. We're starting to look at it, and it's a very emotional issue, because it means, you know, where you went to school isn't where you go to school. So we'll be looking at that too, and be able to, I mean, not provide hard numbers, but just keep in mind there's an emotional piece that goes with that in that process.
Yeah, the superintendent has that emotional piece with 2 kids at Cobble, so this is a real piece. And I think it's fair too, because I said that there is no plan right now. But it all depends on what happens with Shadow Pines. We're at capacity at 2 of our elementary buildings right now, and we're taking a look at what we need to do.
Clearly spoken. I appreciate you doing that. And your penance for not being on a committee is that you'll be in the leadership of the education piece. So, okay. No, first to Neil, and then over here. Yeah, but I want to see some names here, and then we'll have some more discussion.
I appreciate both John and Tom speaking up. In thinking about this myself, look, again, you know, you're mentioning how, again, everyone wants everything to stay the same, but it's not going to stay the same at the school district for a lot of reasons. I think any of these, well, I guess, you know, I see the school district, it's got a responsibility. It's like a public utility. You know, you got to serve the kids that show up at your door.
I can't say we're closed.
Exactly. You know, you can't say you're closed, and I don't think it's in the interests of the town of Penfield either, in either of these localities or in general, to say we don't want any more residents. We've had this study from long ago. Oh, you got to have a pretty pricey house to pay your way, but you know, you got to supply the kids. So, in a way, I think it just suggests that 2, 3, 4, and 5, you know, might have different numbers of kids. There might be different age ranges of the owners, single family versus under mixed use, you know, a senior citizen place. But whatever the kids are, you got to provide an education for them, and we just got to deal with it. So, in a way, I hear what you're saying. We're not going to have hard numbers, and we're just going to have kind of, well, this one is different than that one because there's fewer kids. We're just going to have to deal with that uncertainty, because that's all we've got.
Thank you,
but I
Neil.
appreciate it.
Okay, really quick, because I want to get some names.
Very quick. I want to support what Carrie was saying. I feel the committees have got to have diversity in attitudes towards the project. If you got 5 passionate people that are going to go like lemmings over the cliff, and there's nobody there to halt them,
No,
you're not going to get good answers.
but there are going to be.
At the evaluation,
Yeah,
as long as there's a.
You got the whole. It takes a committee to make a recommendation.
But I'm
So
saying the individual committees.
Yeah, the challenge, Jack, is people do not want to serve on a committee where there's 3 other passionate people and they don't believe in it. Okay?
I could handle that.
Well, and you may, but most people won't sign up for that, and they'll realize that night is time to rearrange their sock drawer. Okay? And so they can't make the meeting. Okay, I want to hear some names here. Shadow Lakes, who wants, remember, I want to have a name on everybody except, we've got the school district. Who wants their name on number 1? One at a time. Ann Zika. Ziki.
Okay, we're on the full names.
Whatever you'd like, because you're going to have to produce this, so whatever you'd like.
I'll go with full.
Okay, and Tom Rocco.
I do.
You got one of them.
Okay, so as I call out your name, if Zach doesn't know you, just angle your card towards him so he can, okay. Ray Hutch. And Jack Kench.
And there's nobody to fight with that I can see.
Okay.
Jack, did I spell that right?
Yes, you did.
Kench, A-N-C-H.
Okay. Is that it?
For to let us have a round.
Number 2, Shadow Pines to be recreation or open space. Jim Froome. Okay, how did I guess? Todd, is it Mahaley? Mahaley. Mahaley, Todd Mahaley. Okay. Bob Peterson.
Todd, I'm sorry, your last name?
M.I.
Mahaley, sorry.
No problem. Okay, Bob Peterson.
I heard that one.
Okay, you're E-list
Sorry,
now,
next
Jim.
one.
Bob Peterson.
Thank you.
Hardest job in the room is typing in front of people. I have facilitated all over the world, and that is a high-pressure thing. Unless you're a typist. Okay,
I do the same thing tomorrow morning. It's okay.
Laura Downey and Neil Madden.
L-O-R-A.
Sorry, wrong way.
IE and Neil Madden. Don't worry about the spelling, we can clean this up. Shadow Pines to be developed for single-family detached residential. Please, just so I can keep crowd control, just one person at a time, please.
Can I ask
Yeah.
a clarifying question? So your expectation is everyone on this committee is going to volunteer for a scenario and one of the criteria? Okay.
Yeah. That's my hope. Okay, Sam.
Thank you.
Last.
OGIE.
Thank you.
Anybody else to work that with Sam? Carrie. Thank you. Carrie Ivers.
Or why? Sorry, Zach.
No, please. There we go. That one I can see.
It feels so good when it stops, Zach. Okay, anybody else? Let's go to number 4. Should be coming up on a bunch of names. Who's on number 4? Okay, hearing none, let's go to number 5. Okay, going around, it's Heidi Rasmussen. Just put Heidi there, you can fill the rest in. Yeah, number 5, number 5.
Next year.
Right? No, I didn't get any hands for 4.
Don't move it. There you go.
Okay, let's stop right there. Let's go to 4, and Don Crum would like to be on 4. Okay, now let's go back to 5. Who else is on 5? Okay, we have Mike Ciavari. And we have Dan McCusker. And we have Jim Olmsted. You can just put Jim A, you can put the initials down here if you want. Wayne Smith. Art Patrone. Ray Hutch. And Craig Kalkman.
Missed the last 2.
Craig Kalkman and Ray Hutch.
Ray knows he's on 2, right?
Craig, how do I spell your last name? Craig.
Ray, you're okay being on 2, right?
Okay.
I'm okay
As calendars open.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, yes, Carrie?
We were just saying, and Don, not that we want to rope you into number 3, but we could probably combine 3 and 4 as far as the committee goes.
Okay, so we have a suggestion
Not combine them as scenarios.
that the committee would be the same for 4 and 5.
3 and 4.
3 and 4. Okay.
fill out the volunteers.
So you got 3 people for each.
You can put on there.
So, how do you feel about that?
Yes. If they're up for it, if they're up for it.
Okay. Okay, so we'll copy that in.
I would join the 3-4 committee. I would join the 3-4 group.
Okay, so after Don Crum comes Neil Madden. And does that mean, where were you before, Neil? You were at 2.
Yeah, I was at 2.
Do you want to be on 2, or?
I'm the naysayer on 2, you know, I put pride in that role.
So you want to stay on 2?
I'll stay on 2.
Stay on 2 and on to 3 and 4. Okay. So you're just leaving 2 scenarios on the table here. I mean, you could run the board.
Yeah, no.
It's like Donald Trump, you know? I can run the board.
It's okay.
Okay.
I think that's.
Can we volunteer for 2?
What's that?
Can we volunteer for 2?
Yeah. Absolutely. I want to see everybody's name on something, but yeah, you can volunteer. Would you like to be on?
I wouldn't mind being added to 2.
Okay. Craig would like to be on 2 as well.
It shouldn't get bigger than that.
Okay. How does that look and feel to you? Okay? Okay. So we have to think about, now that we're 3 minutes from our official ending, how are we doing on time? Can we go? You got to go?
I have to go, so I apologize.
Okay. Well, wait a minute. Wait, you owe me 4 more minutes.
I'm sorry.
Okay. No, I'm not. No, you don't get out of, just because you got your mom doesn't, you don't get out of class early. Okay? So my vision is on next actions for 2 weeks from now, that the committee would be responsible for clustering. There would be somebody elected to be a single point of contact so that it doesn't have to go to everybody. That we would expect on the 23rd to have a SWOT analysis. This is just broad, simple stuff. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for your alternatives. And if you get to the point of what things you want to check out, that would be great. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, and evaluation, things you want to check out. Aside from the normal things like we've got to check with the school district and we got to know how much infrastructure is. If there are things that, specific things that your committee says we'd like to check that out. And then each committee, because we're really evolving, where you're going to have a bigger and bigger role at these committees, and all I'm going to do is try to be traffic cop to keep the conversation. I'd try to do a better job than I did tonight to keep us on track, because we left about half the agenda untouched. But it's important for you to feel like, okay, this works for us. So then your expectation for the next meeting is to make a presentation of that. It would probably be about 15 minutes tops, probably 10, in summarizing that piece, so that we could, we've got 5, so 10, 50, that would be a lot. So 10 minutes on the summary of that. So then we could have 5 minutes of people asking you questions of fact. Did you think about this? Do you have concerns about that? So that then we could figure out where we're going after the 23rd for the next steps to begin to develop it for the June 6th. And then, unless you want to go to longer meetings, and you can do that if you want.
Can we, is there any possibility that we can work through Dropbox or some other means to define criteria? I don't really see how these committees can make much progress in presenting meaningful SWOT analysis if we haven't agreed on what the criteria are, or the evaluation items, or whatever word we want to use. What are those things that we have to be thinking about? And we're out of time. Can we do this somehow offline?
No, we're not out of time. We're out of time for Carrie. So if people want to stay another half hour, I'm cool with that, and we work through the list, but she's got commitment. Okay. Yes, Zach?
Just to provide a quick answer to that, I think the best way to facilitate instant communication for those criteria would just be through email, and everyone has each other's email. So start just your own thread between your groups, because Dropbox really isn't the place to establish that immediate communication. It's document sharing. you'd have to have somebody download something, upload something, just to get those updates.
Yeah,
And
I'm
email
saying
is
that-
much quicker, just so people are aware of that.
I'm just saying, however we do it, whether we stay half an hour longer, whether we find some way to do it offline, I really think it's important that we define
Yeah.
some criteria so that we actually know what we should be doing over the next 2 weeks.
Right. So I agree with you, and I'm willing to stay a few minutes to try to see if we can come up with that. I am just don't want to overpromise and underdeliver after the hour and 15 minutes it took us for titles. Okay. So let's talk about that. Is everybody okay for another 20 minutes anyways? 8:20? Can we do that? Sure. Okay.
I think we know.
Well, let's put down what we know.
Okay, I mean, I think what we know, you know, it's kind of like public investment, public ongoing costs. Because to me, like number 2, you know, I assume, I think it was mentioned at the first meeting, hey, let's have the town buy this. Well, you know, that's an element that the rest of these scenarios don't have. You know, the rest are all some private person is making the capital investment. But, you know, the rest are, you know, traffic, you know, kind of infrastructure. You know, again, we said, hey, if it's a private developer, they're doing sewer and water. But, you know, there's going to be different amounts expended on sewer and water for 255 single-family lots versus cluster versus mixed use, I suppose. So anyways, that's that kind of water, sewer, traffic. Traffic's always an issue.
Okay, so we've got a bunch of them. So let's pick one. Neil, what category? Pick one. You said infrastructure first.
Right, infrastructure.
Okay. Everybody okay with that? Okay, so this is about when you do your SWOT analysis that you're going to think about it from this category as to get us started.
Neil, when you say infrastructure, what specifically do you mean? Are we going to break out traffic and we're going to break out utilities, or is that all lumped together?
I would keep traffic separate. I mean, I think that's all a separate consideration. It's a separate science in a sense. So the infrastructure for me was just the water and sewer, you know, drainage. You have to more drainage to deal with if you have the 255 single-family lots than if you have clustering.
Okay, so if I put down here infrastructure is everything except traffic, so that's utilities and drainage and circulation, roads.
Access is more important than traffic. Okay. You know how you're going to get in and out of the property. You don't know how much traffic's going to result.
No, but he's suggesting access would be in this.
Yeah.
Does that work for you, Ray?
Yes.
Okay. So everything except traffic. Okay? And Sam, you had your hand up?
Oh, I could list a whole bunch, but the one that I want to make sure is on there is education.
Got it.
Impact on the school district.
Okay. Next.
Traffic. And again, hopefully the engineering department could help us out. I mean, you know, there's traffic generation rates, blah, blah, blah. There's,
got it. Jim?
Tax revenue?
Okay.
I would say impact on the taxpayers.
Okay, that's fine.
Taxpayer impact. Okay. Who's got another one who hasn't contributed? Who's got one?
The likely attractiveness to the current owners.
Let me just put here, if you're okay with that, implementability.
All right.
No. Sam says no.
Well, that's a different issue. One is, another way of saying, I think what he just said is quality of life for existing residents of Penfield. Implementability is, can we possibly make this happen?
I'm talking about the property owners.
Appeal to old castle.
Okay, so
I think you're right. Implement.
how about realism? Implementability. Mike says.
Or it's the value to the property, because if we go a different route, you're changing the value of what that property is, so.
The current owner doesn't care what happens to Shadow Pines as long as they get the $3.5 million or whatever they feel it's worth, right?
Well, if we don't have a proposal that Old Castle can live with, it's going to be hard to get through. So,
Okay.
I think, I still like the way I worded it initially. So.
Which was?
So attractiveness to
The
current landowner?
The likely attractiveness to the current property owners. Yes.
Okay, so Jim is saying the likely attractiveness to the property owner as a category of evaluation for this, okay? Jim is saying yes, Sam's saying no. Give me a sense here whether you want that on the list. This is not the last time you have to deal with it. This is about having you do meaningful work before the 23rd.
I just think it's too
I'm unclear what you're
specific.
saying. Yeah, I mean, are you saying impact to the current owners of the property or impact to the neighbors?
What I hear Jim saying is, can this really be done? I hear a pragmatic engineer's viewpoint. Does this really have a chance in hell? That's what I hear.
That's correct.
Okay. Because we speak civil engineer, I hear that. The question is whether you want to do that in this first evaluation or not. I would suggest, Jim, you don't. I would say this is at a high level, and as you drill down and come back with more information, there's going to be a piece there that says, is this really, for the next meeting after, can we actually do this?
Well, think of it as viability. If you want to put down viability.
Okay.
Fine.
The question is viability. It's about being implemented, right?
Yes.
Can it be implemented? Realism? I'm just throwing words out here because I'm not sensing the energy from the group about this.
Okay.
Let's put it on the bin list, Jim, because people are not, it's not resonating. And it is possible, what's that?
I didn't see a vote, I was sure.
Okay.
For those of us that are on,
Raise the question as to what they're voting. If you're in favor of blank, raise your hand. Fill in the blank. Fill in the blank, Jim.
Oh, I come back to viability or attractiveness to the current property owner.
Okay, if you're in favor of having attractiveness to the current property owner be an evaluation criteria, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's not carried.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, other categories here. This is for the first cut. Yes, Tom.
Health and quality of life.
Okay. So if I say quality of life,
Well, there's a broad definition of health. A very broad definition of health includes quality of life. Yeah. But I think it's important to put health, well, anyway, do what you want. Yeah, it's fine.
if I said Penfield quality of life, would that
Sure, that's great.
would that give you enough running room?
Yeah.
Okay.
Somebody named Penfield.
Feel.
That's it.
So, do you ever notice that the longer you go in a committee meeting, people get very agreeable? God, make him stop! Just say yes!
No, we were just sideboarding.
I can't take it!
We were just sideboarding that if we go back to Dan Penfield, we're back to the master plan, so we're all set.
Okay, other categories.
Is property value included with taxes?
Whose property value?
Yeah, current residents or residents that surround.
Okay, so I would think that this could be not only tax, but this could really be
Neighbor.
property owner impact. that could be taxes and value, if you wanted to change that. Or you could have another one that would say property owner impact.
Yeah.
Neighborhood effect.
It's neighborhood impact is what I was.
Neighborhood impact.
Yes.
Laura is saying neighborhood impact. Is there general consensus for that? I see 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Okay, there's, no, well, you're getting very malleable. You're going to hold me to my word for those 20 minutes. Neighborhood. Problem with markers, there's no spell check. Okay, other categories. This is just the first cut of getting from now to the 23rd. Because there's going to be other stuff that comes up. Okay, this is just to get the group connected from small group to large group to say, what does this elephant look like and where do we have to go next? For the people who are passionate about it, and the people say that's baloney.
How about financial viability?
Financial viability. So that's, we're back to Jim, but a little bit.
It deserves to be there.
Financial viability, got 2 votes for financial viability down here. Okay, so Jim, you're on the board.
That's an element.
Okay? Is that it? Tired? Yep.
I see a lot of strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities, but one of the threats is the impact on private property rights for everybody.
Say more.
So if you're, let's say, you want to accept a purchase offer as a landowner, is there an impact on, is that a threat that the impact is that I might not be able to do that? And what's the impact on the private property rights of everybody in the neighborhood? Because there is an impact if something changes. Value, restrictions, whatever it may be. And is that a threat?
Isn't that number 6?
Well, the threat also, ultimately, could be the threat of litigation that falls within that. That's the only reason I bring it up as a threat. Because you're dangling with private property rights, which are fairly clearly defined.
Legal impact?
Well, that's part of it, yeah.
It's not 6.
The challenge I have with the legal impact is we're going to have a lot of non-lawyers making legal judgments. And I don't want you to spend a lot of time on this. This is about, your charge is to make a recommendation for the good of the town of Penfield long-term. There's a recommendation that goes to the board. They will deliberate on it. And as I said last week, they will seek legal counsel before they go make their choice. And those folks who are schooled in that will decide whether to negotiate, to talk, to fight going forward. But there will, it really isn't about the committee. I just don't want you to get that far into it because everybody in this room is going to have a legal opinion. And it really doesn't matter. It's only the town and their council will make their best judgment.
I think we got enough, particularly given the time we've got. And, you know, at the end of this, I mean, it's part of the, if there's a change of zoning, the town may be doing a full environmental impact statement. Any project that comes of this magnitude, talking about, you know, Shadow Pines, the totality of the size of it, it's going to have environmental impact statements. So I think we just, if we have this handful and kind of try to, you know, toss them up in the air and get some relative discussion going, that's probably good enough, and it's all we can do in the time we've got, I think.
Okay, so there's a motion that we've got enough homework for the committees for the next 2 weeks.
Second.
Okay, I'm not seeing any opposition to that. So, just to review, you're going to connect as a committee, and I will send out an email about this. You're going to connect as a committee. You're going to elect a single individual to be the spokesperson for that, and the leader of that. Doesn't mean that that's the person that's going to make a presentation at the information meeting. It's just somebody who says, I'll own getting people together and moving this ahead. You're going to get together as a group and come up with an assessment of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And whatever, if you have a list of things you'd like to check out because there wasn't enough time by the 23rd, we'd like to check this out. We didn't have time to do that. It's not full-born. We're not expecting for you to throw a javelin at us because we didn't have these 3 things checked out. And then when you do that assessment, that SWOT assessment, you're going to have in your mind these 7 things that, so is this a strength of it? Is it a weakness of it? Is there an opportunity for the town of Penfield? And Sam says.
So are these going to be the rows in our matrix if we have the scenarios as the column?
That's what I would make them.
Okay.
Without any prejudice towards order or title, that eventually these would be the rows in your matrix.
I think it'll be helpful as we walk the property, assuming we can walk the property, if our committees can keep our own charge for our subcommittee in mind as we walk the property.
Sure. Great suggestion. There's a great French philosopher, Anis Nin, who says, we see the world not as it is, we see the world as we are. And so when you walk the property, you will see the world from your scenario and what is good or bad about your scenario. And it's almost impossible to separate yourself from that. Okay. Any
Question for the committee? Just looking at the list to avoid confusion, would anyone be against us taking out the parentheses that says excluding traffic, since traffic is the 3rd item?
Take it out.
Okay.
It's all time. Okay, yep. And we only need Bob. Bob. Don't forget Bob. So I'm just going to do this because I take pictures of these and I got to remember to tell Bob he's got to sign up for a scenario. That's what that means. Anything else? Next meeting is Monday the 23rd. Hopefully that doesn't conflict with the school board. Right, John?
We're good.
Good, okay. Right here in this town hall, light supper, and 2.5 hours of the best fun you're going to have all week. So thank you very much for your full engagement and your professionalism. Safe drive home.